Hi, everyone. I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening. Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg. I'm your host of Yoga Birth Babies, and today we're going to talk about all the scary things that newborns do that new parents should know are totally normal. They might freak out when they first see it. I know I did several times, but these are completely normal things. So to have this conversation, I have Dr. Tracey Agnese. She is a board-certified pediatrician and a partner in a private practice on the Upper West Side in Manhattan, woohoo, my old stomping ground. She is a clinical instructor of pediatrics at both NYU as well as Mount Sinai hospitals in NYC. And she's been practicing as a physician in New York for over 10 years. I had such a great conversation with Tracey. She just laid out so many of the things that as new parents we're thinking, oh my goodness, this is craziness. Is this normal? And she just normalizes the whole thing. And that can just help you feel more confident about this very strange path of becoming a parent and trying to figure out how to keep this baby alive. So I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation with Tracey. Before we get to that, I just want to give a shout out to all the students that keep popping into class. It has become like this own little melting pot. We are having people from all over taking class, and I love that our community continues to grow. One of the conversations that just came up in class is when we reopen, are we going to continue our online classes? Now, first of all, I think it's going to be a while until we reopen, and all the students that are asking these questions will have had their babies. They might be back for a postnatal or baby and me, but we're planning, we're already figuring out how to go about doing kind of our in-studio while also doing our online. There's no reason to shut the door and not keep this community thriving. It's a joy, it's a privilege, it's an honor to watch people go through their pregnancy and transition into parenthood. And I'm deeply grateful that people continue to show up for that and that I can serve them to the best of my ability as well as our team. So thank you. Thank you for doing so. I'm also super excited that our teacher training continues to grow and plow forward. And again, this has been so great. Our last training, we had a couple people from Canada, from the west side of Canada, and then we had someone from Switzerland. We had someone from the West Coast. We had someone from Mississippi. It's just amazing that we were able to all gather and work together. And that's exciting that we can do this online. So our next one that's starting January, February is full, but we do have space in the one after that, the March and April. So if you're playing with the idea of diving deep into the world of prenatal yoga, check out our website, prenatalyogacenter.com. You can check out the teacher training. We've got a newsletter specifically for our teacher training or teacher people who are interested in yoga. We also have our weekly newsletter that has some tips and fun things about what's going on at the studio. Okay, I think that's enough of me. Let's take one more quick break and we come back. Please enjoy my conversation with Tracey.
Spin your passion into a business with Shopify and break sales records with the world's best converting checkout. Let's hear that one more time. The world's best converting checkout. Shopify's legendary checkout makes it easier for customers to shop on your website, across social media, and everywhere in between. Now that's music to your ears. Any way you spin it, you can be a smash hit with Shopify. Start your $1 a month trial today at shopify.com/records.
Hi, Tracey. How are you?
Hi, good. Thanks so much for having me today.
Oh, I am so excited to talk to you. And I love that you approached me with an amazing topic, scary things that newborns do that new parents should know are normal. Because I remember holding a brand new baby before I was even a parent. And I'm like, this is weird. And then even after having my own, there were some things I just didn't know. And I'd been a doula for almost a decade. And there are still some things that surprised me. So I think we're going to have a really great conversation diving in. But I guess before we do that, why don't we hear a little bit about you and what drew you to pediatrics? And you were just telling me before we get started, you just got your IBCLC. That's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. So I think I always wanted to be a pediatrician. I remember going to garage sales with my mom, like buying stuffed animals that I would put in my office one day, but I didn't even really know what that meant, right? But it's something I wanted to do. I actually took a little bit of a break in college. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go straight to med school. But then I realized that is what I wanted to do. So I did my medical school at SUNY Downstate in Brooklyn, and I did my pediatrics residency at NYU. But, during medical school, I realized that I thought I wanted to be an OB actually at first. And I realized I didn't want to be a surgeon, and I was more interested in the baby when the baby came out. And so then I just fell in love with pediatrics. So I went into that, and now I'm in a private practice in the city on the Upper West Side. I've been practicing pediatrics for 10 years, and I love it.
And the fact that you also committed to get your lactation consultant, IBCLC, that is a huge commitment. I know how many hours that is, but it's so great to have a different eye than the pediatrician, like knowing what to look for in breastfeeding and problem solving. That is such a great gift to the parent that comes in with their new baby.
Yeah. And I think it started because I'm a pediatrician, and I thought when I had my first baby that, I'd be fine and it's all going to be okay. And similar, to sounds like your experience, I had this baby, and there was so much about being the mom that I just wasn't expecting and prepared for, even with all my medical training, and how hard it was. And breastfeeding was one of those things that I had a really hard time with. So, I am happy to be able to help, my patients with that now.
It's so great. I love hearing that. All right. So let's start. The first thing I want to start with. So when I did my prenatal training, which is literally 20 years ago, I had never really been around like new littles. And I remember holding this baby, and all of a sudden there was like this mustard seed looking liquid on me, and everyone laughed, and I laughed, and I didn't know what that was. And then they later told me that's poop. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So I had no idea. So let's talk about baby poop.
Yeah.
What's normal? How much? How often? Go.
Yeah. So poop is something that we talk a lot about in pediatrics, especially in the beginning there. And people are always so surprised as to what's normal for baby poop. It is not like adult poop at all, right? So
clearly,
they poop a lot. So once the baby poops out that dark, thick, tarry meconium in those, the first day or two of life, after that, then the baby starts getting actual, milk in. Then the poops become so many different colors. There's such a wide range. I actually like to tell my patients that it can be various colors of the tree that are normal. Yellow, orange, brown, green, mustardy. That mustard seed is a very classic breastfed baby poop, and they are liquidy. The poops are really liquidy. Like what you would call diarrhea for an adult is normal baby poop. It's really liquidy, and the consistency could change day to day and be a little, thicker. Formula fed babies are a little thicker, maybe a little darker, but the poop is a lot, and it's a lot too. It's like, they're feeding a lot and they're pooping a lot. So it could be up to 8 to 10 poops a day in the beginning, when they are, starting to grow.
And it can travel up their back.
And it can travel up their backs for sure. It could travel up their backs. And, some things that poop should not be though is, red. Like you wouldn't, if you think you see blood in the poop, that would be reason to call your doctor, or truly black or truly white, which are very rare, but those would be things to call your doctor about. Or consistently like mucousy and snotty, like it looks like you blew your nose in the baby's diaper, that would be reason to check in. But it can be so many different things. And not all babies poop that much though either. Sometimes babies have a few days in between poops. So once your baby's back to birth weight and is growing okay, if the baby holds on to the poop and kind of holds on to all the nutrients that he or she needs to grow, and then lets out a poop after a few days, as long as it's that soft poop, then it's okay.
Well, that also brings me up to, so that's baby poop. And this could be, you said, up to 8-10 times a day or every couple days. But what about wet diapers? How often should people be keeping an eye on that, and how many a day?
Sure. So in the beginning, the rule is generally on day 1 of life, so that's within the first 24 hours, you want 1 PP diaper. On day 2, you want 2. Day 3, you want 3. Day 4, you want 4. Day 5, you want 5. And then after that, babies are having like a few 5, 6 or more PP diapers a day. And that's normal. Parents always ask the question, well, how to count poops and pees and all that. And I usually try to reassure them that as long as stuff is coming out, like that's what we want. And that's a good sign. So if that diaper is so wet and mixed up and there's poop in there, but the strip is blue and you're like, well, did it turn pee too? I mean, you can count that because it's really just, we're counting what comes out,
Okay. So that makes a lot of sense. I remember people asking me about that and I just was in such a daze. I'm like, I don't remember, but I know there was a change. And my midwife and my pediatrician was asking for numbers and I'm like, oh, there's so much to think about. Let's also talk about feeds because I felt like in the beginning, my boobs were just out constantly. Felt like I was never stopping the feeding. Mm-hmm. What's normal? What's to be expected?
Yeah. So that is really normal. So in the beginning, in that first month, like 8 to 12 feeds a day is normal for babies. And it's a few reasons. One, their tummies are so small that, they just can't hold on to a lot at one time. So they need to feed frequently. And then, in the first few weeks too, you're establishing your feeding supply. If you're breastfeeding, your body it's a supply and demand thing. So the baby initially, when you're not making that much, your baby feeding on you is stimulating your brain to make the milk. So it's a process of, creating the milk. So it's a lot and it's a lot. And they feed, when we count feeds, this is always important too. And it's a question, that people ask a lot is you count from the beginning of one feed to the beginning of the next feed, right?
It's like a contraction. The beginning to beginning.
From the beginning to the beginning. So if you're doing that and you're feeding on each breast, for whatever, 15, 20 minutes and the baby poops in the middle or you're burping and, it takes a long time. And then by the time it's basically every 2 to 3 hours from the beginning to the beginning, by the time you're like done and you think you're good, it's really soon, until the next feed. So it's a lot in the beginning.
It is. Yeah. I just remember feeling the first month or so was relentless. I'm like, oh my God, will I get out of my apartment? And it took a lot because every time we were done feeding, I felt like we had a tiny break and then we were back there or a nap or something. So that's when I keep talking a little bit about, because I know feeding gets people anxious. And you mentioned the baby's birth weight and getting back to the baby's birth weight. Can you talk about how normal it is? Because babies do lose a little weight after birth, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sure. I could talk about that. So most babies lose, weight in the beginning and we expect that. So, babies we kind of allow them to lose up to 10% of their birth weight. So they go home from the hospital and then they might even lose a little more after they go home from the hospital. We like to see them starting to gain weight again, usually between days 3 and 5. And usually that coincides with when the breast milk supply starts getting more as well. So then the baby's actually starting to get in. And the weight loss, has a few different reasons. It's like fluid shifts from the birth and also they're not taking that much in, but that's okay. We expect that. So that's why those wet diaper requirements in the beginning are not as much as they are after 3 to 5 days. And then we like to see them get back to their birth weight by about 2 weeks.
So here's a question also, and this came up because in teacher training we were talking about this. So if a parent has chosen epidural, they're going to have continuous IV fluid. And can't that then bulk up the baby's weight more artificially because they're getting continuous fluid? Is that taken in consideration when we're concerned about the loss of birth weight?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that is something that as a lactation consultant, I feel like I got more, of understanding of that with that process, because that fluid does, translate to the baby. So, that is part of that up to 10%. Once you're getting to 10% though, I think that, you're getting, that's our borderline as far as, if there were fluids or not, it's still a little much, but we don't take any one particular thing, as pediatricians and say what to do based on that. It's usually a bunch of things. So it's percent weight loss, as well as the mom's milk, if she's, if that's in, and also those wet diapers, those pees and those poops, that also goes into the consideration of if it's too much or not.
Oh, that's really helpful. Thank you. All right. Yeah. I want to talk about babies' breathing patterns, because I remember literally Googling, be like, irregular breathing. I thought he was like hyperventilating. I didn't understand. So babies, is it normal that they have irregular breathing patterns?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So there's a few things about their breathing patterns and their rates, right? So, first of all, they breathe faster than adults. The normal
I was terrified. I'm like, what's happening?
They breathe faster. Their normal respiratory rate of an adult is about 20, and that's how many breaths per minute that a normal adult takes. And newborns, it can be anywhere from 30 to 60. So their rate is just faster in general, but they also have this very irregular breathing pattern. So in adults, when we are calculating their respiratory rate, we can look at an adult and watch over 15 seconds, and whatever that number is, we can multiply by 4 because that's a minute, right? And we can get their respiratory rate. You cannot do that in babies because they have such an irregular breathing pattern that you actually have to count for a full minute. And so when I say irregular, it'll be like, they'll be like, and so they go in and out of this fast, slow breathing. So I always tell new parents, if you are concerned that your baby's breathing too fast, you do want to look at your watch and look over a full minute. If they have a sustained, really fast breath for a full minute, that might be a concern. And also, look at their chest and their belly when they're breathing. If they are sucking in their ribs and their belly's like seesawing in and out, that's a concern. That's not normal. But this, in and out of a little huff and puff is not normal for an adult, is normal for a newborn.
I think that's really helpful. And I like the tips you gave about looking at their belly, not just the breathing. Ooh, these are such good tips. All right. We're going to take a super quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about a conversation every parent has, and it's all about sleep. We'll be right back.
Swimsuit? Check. Sunscreen? Check. Phone charger? Check. Don't forget to pack the 5-Hour Energy. It fits great in a pocket or carry-on, and the alert feeling will help you arrive ready for anything. Now get 20% off when you use code 5HETRAVEL at 5hourenergy.com. Expires April 30th. One-time use only. Not valid with other discounts. Remember, visit 5hourenergy.com and use code 5HETRAVEL to save 20%. Looks like you need a vacation. Enter the 5-Hour Energy Where Will the Tide Take You sweepstakes. You could win a $10,000 dream beach vacation. Imagine jet setting off to a tropical paradise, having fun in the sun, or diving at a gorgeous reef. It's up to you. No purchase necessary. Go to 5HETide.com for official rules and to enter. That's 5HETide.com. Enter today. Ends June 30th, 2024.
Okay, we are back. Oh, such a big topic with new parents. It is, I'm constantly hearing people say, oh, my baby slept through the night, or my baby didn't sleep through the night. When did your baby start to sleep? How many hours? So, wow, this is a huge can of worms. So let's go sleep. What is normal realm for a newborn? What are the expectations? What is actually sleeping through the night? And then also, let's throw this out there. As an IBCLC, can you talk about, do bottle-fed babies sleep longer than breastfed? I heard that rumor moving around too.
Yeah, sure. I'll try to. Yeah. If I don't hit them all, let me know. But okay. We'll start with the first. Okay. So normal newborn sleep in the beginning is they sleep a lot. They can sleep 16, 18, maybe even up to 20 hours a day in a 24-hour period. Wow. In the beginning, and that's usually for like the first 2 weeks. They're really sleepy, and so that becomes hard to feed the baby because we said how often they feed, and so a lot of new parents are just like, I can't feed the baby. The baby's so sleepy, and you try. And there's some tricks and things you can try, but generally around 2 weeks of age, the babies wake up a bit and it does become a little bit easier. But that sleep is, not very consolidated. It's little bits here and there. So you are not, between feeding and sleeping and, you're
a hot mess.
You are up a lot, even though that baby's sleeping 18 hours a day. You're not, you don't have that amount of time. So they sleep a lot.
Okay. And so then what about and then I remember thinking like, oh, our baby's so awesome. I don't know what this everyone's talking about you don't sleep. And then that changes though after about 2 weeks. So it changes. And then what's the expectation of what happens after that? So I feel like it was every 6 hours, sometimes every 3 hours. Were we just not sure? We probably had no idea what we were doing. What's the expectation after those 2 weeks?
Yeah. So babies they don't have their own circadian rhythm for a little while, for at least the first 6 to 8 weeks, right? So, when the baby's in the mom's belly, they follow the circadian rhythm of the mom. And that circadian rhythm is your clock, your inner, clock as far as day and night. And so, when they're born, they just don't have that. And so a lot of them, have it reversed and they, are party animals up all night because they just don't have that normal circadian rhythm. By 6 to 8 weeks, it's starting to be established, a little more where they can know days and nights and get it right. But as they still have really small tummies, so they're still needing to feed often. Usually they can go, a few stretches of longer and, hopefully that's at night. So maybe that's 3-4 hours, maybe longer. Some babies do, longer than that, 4 or 5 hours. And you might get 1 or 2 of those stretches, in those, in that first, month or 2 of life. And that would be great. And that's totally fine. Usually we say once the baby's back up to the birth weight, you let them sleep at night. You don't have to wake them up to feed. And if you get a long stretch, that's great, And then as far as sleeping through the night, I like to say that, no one really, even adults, sleeps through the night, right? So we all wake up a little bit and we put ourselves back to sleep. We fluff our pillow, we turn to the side, we rub our eyes, we do whatever, and we go back to sleep. And babies do that too. So, as opposed to sleeping through the night, I like to think of it more as like them learning the ability to be able to soothe themselves back to sleep when they do wake up. Because I think part of a lot of the confusion and, people being, upset or feeling like they're not doing what their neighbors are doing around sleep, I think is in the expectations. So if you expect that that's a normal thing, it's a little easier to digest, and so babies can start to self-soothe a little, themselves around 4 months is when they can start to be expected to do that, so there's a lot of, tips and tricks and things you can try to do, early on or to try to get them to be able to have that self-soothing ability, and even then, once it's that time, it's not through the night necessarily, like a full 10, 12 hours, maybe they're going more like 6-8 hours as sleeping through the night without, waking up to feed or disrupting themselves too much.
When does that nighttime feed typically drop? Because I kept it for both my kids, maybe too long. I did it like a year where I would trudge in and feed them and trudge. It got less, but I still had at least one feed for up to a year. Yeah. Maybe I just had bad boundaries.
No, there's so much variation in this. There's just so much variation as far as what people do. There's no one right answer to this. A lot of people do keep that feed through, the first 6-9 months, a year and longer, and it's really more of a conversation with the family. I like to say, like, what are your goals? Because when you talk to people, you realize, sometimes a working mom who, isn't home with her baby all day actually really feels good about that middle of the night feeding, like if it's just one time, and that's something that keeps up her supply and allows her to be able to feed her baby when she's, at work all day, so it's a conversation around what people's, goals are and what works for their family.
That makes a lot of sense. But also let's talk about, we hear often about back is best, but I also noticed that some babies kind of slip themselves on their side. Is that dangerous? Is that okay? Do we push them back onto their back?
No, let them be. Yeah, that's a super common question too. So babies' sleep is also different from adult sleep in that they spend a lot more of their time in sleep in what we call the REM, the rapid eye movement sleep, right? So it's very active sleep, and they spend more time in that active sleep, and their REM is more active than adults. So therefore they're really noisy sleepers. Some babies grunt, they cry in their sleep, and they move around a lot. And so that's part of why they are maybe turning to their side a little bit. It's just their really active sleep. And one of the things that I try to tell new parents early on is, if your baby is doing those things, really noisy or, moving around, I think most people's reaction is to like jump up and like go get that baby, but give it a minute because your baby might just still be sleeping, and see if your baby is actually just sleeping. But if they do turn to their side, as long as you have a safe place that your baby is sleeping in, so that there's no bumpers, that there's no loose blankets, and that there's nothing too soft, that's a firm mattress, and that it's a safe environment, then if your baby turns to the side, that is totally fine. You do not have to move the baby or do anything.
Push the baby back over. Get on your back. Get on your back. But what about babies that are constantly on their back? Do they get a weird shaped head? Is that possible?
Oh, yeah. It's possible. There's definitely more of the flat head since we've had the Back to Sleep campaign than before, for sure. That is definitely a side effect of it. But we do know that babies are much, much, much safer on their backs for sleep. So what
do you do about the flat head situation?
Yeah. So they, as much tummy time as you can do during the day while the baby's awake is the most important thing. So whenever that baby's awake and alert, you should have the baby on his or her tummy. And that is really, really good for to prevent the back of the head, and also not, having the baby lay in other, kind of carriers on the back during the day. So that's the best thing that you can do for it. And then once babies start to roll over, from front to back to front, and be able to sit up, closer to 4 to 6 months, then they're spending less time laying on their back. And so that flat head starts to improve.
So it does improve on its own? Because I'm thinking my kids don't have flat heads, and I don't remember what I did, but they don't have flat heads. So it does on its own start to kind of pop out, I guess. It does.
It definitely does get better, but there are certainly times where, the pediatrician will intervene or recommend somebody intervene if it is too flat. The things I mostly look for are to see if the baby's head is too flat is asymmetry in the face, right? So, and the ear position. So if you're looking at a baby from the front and you can see any sort of facial asymmetry because of the flatness in the back of the head, then that would be somebody I would refer. And the same thing with the ear position. If one is pushed a little forward or back a little, then that would be a reason to refer.
Is it usually an underlying problem like torticollis, like the neck has a problem and therefore that head is always in that same position?
It can be. A lot of babies do have a little bit of that torticollis, that kind of, muscle the muscle that's a little tighter on one side than the other. Sometimes maybe from the positioning in the womb or something that they just have a preference for, afterwards. So if it isn't to that one side, there are certainly exercises, that can be done from either your pediatrician or a physical therapist, to, move those neck muscles around, loosen them up a bit so that the baby, moves more like a 360 degree, side to side. Equally.
Yeah. I love hearing, I love going into like the weird little things that are kind of off the beaten path. And so here's another one. So, cradle cap. My daughter had it forever, and a lot of body hair when she was both of them look like little monkeys, So what about, and baby pimples and peeling skin, all of these things that you're like, you're not as cute in these baby pictures as I would have thought. So what do you do about that?
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So cradle cap, we could start there. So cradle cap is, these greasy looking yellow scales that babies get.
Kind of gross.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of gross. And it's like, it can be on their scalp, which is the cap part of it, but it can also be on their face. It can be behind their ears, on their ears. Sometimes they get it on their bodies. And then usually the skin underneath that greasy yellow scale is a little redder too. And what it is that grease is coming from the sebaceous glands, which are the oil producing glands in the skin. And it's not a disease. It's not a problem. It actually is the same, underlying pathophysiology and medical term of dandruff in teenagers and adults. It's really the same thing. What causes it exactly? We don't know exactly. There's probably a few different components. Some of it might have to do with hormones from the mom and the baby, or there can be some like fungal component to to it as well. But it's common. It's usually like around 2 to 3 weeks of age and then through the first year, but it peaks around maybe 3 months of age. And what I'd like to recommend is that you just use an emollient, like an ointment, emollient, like a Vaseline or something, and you just like keep it on, or you can even use like a baby oil or something like that, or really any oils, you leave it on, and that'll loosen up the scales. And then you can use a fine tooth comb to comb out all those loose scales. But it's not something that gets taken care of after one time of that. It's something that you do,
it's a commitment. I remember doing that.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, then so that's cradle cap, but what about the baby pimples?
Yeah, so baby pimples, which used to be called a neonatal acne, so that's around like 3 weeks of age. It's pretty common. I think it's like 20% or so. It's pretty common in babies. And that's where you see these pimples like on their cheeks and on their scalp, could be too. And really it's mild, you don't really do anything about it. You don't put emollients on. You don't put anything on. You really just
don't pop them.
Yeah, you don't pop them. You don't give them medicines really. Very rarely would anybody do that. You just like use a very gentle soap and water, and really you avoid extra oils and lotions and stuff like that. And usually by around like 4 months of age, it gets better. And that's actually different than a different acne, which is infantile acne, which then is much less common and starts around 4 months of age. And that's more severe, and that's really more like bad teenage acne that might have to do with hormones. So that is different. But the newborn one is pretty common, and usually, just goes away on its own.
Okay, I'm so fascinated. I had never heard of the infantile acne. What is that?
Yeah, so that's just it's like a later peak, and it really can look like really bad teenage acne. And
I don't think I've ever seen that.
Yeah, it's not that common. Yeah, but sometimes you see it. But
what do you do for that?
Mostly nothing. I mean, sometimes, the doctors will prescribe antifungals or steroids for those types of, acnes, but usually not much.
Let it pass.
Yeah.
What about the peeling skin that newborns get?
Yeah, sure. So they're in amniotic fluid for, 9 months. And in order for their skin to be protected from that amniotic fluid, which has a lot of stuff in it, babies have a vernix, right? That thick coating on their skin. Yeah. And so once they're born, that vernix is now suddenly gone. And that fresh baby skin that has never seen anything in, the world or in utero is exposed to air for the first time. And so it gets dry, and it peels off. And it can peel and crack. Usually there's really nothing to do about it. But I usually do say if it is getting really dry, like it really cracked and bleeding, most commonly at the creases of like the wrists and maybe the ankles is where you would see that. Then again, you could put like an emollient on it to just moisten it. And then it'll peel off that first layer of skin, and it'll, over time get, thicker and less baby soft.
Yeah. I remember doing a lot of infant massage with my kids and slathering. We did a lot of shea butter all over them.
Yeah.
I loved that. So now what about my poor children, my hairy children? I know someday they're going to hear this, and my daughter especially is going to be mortified because her back is still kind of hairy. So, what about some of them come out with lots of hair, not just on their head, but like on their shoulders.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is called lanugo, and it's actually protective, and it is there to hold that vernix onto the skin. So it's there for a good purpose, and it keeps that vernix on. And then it usually goes away with time. So that's why you'll see like preterm babies have more of that lanugo than full-term babies, but still full-term babies can have it. And it's usually gone, after the first 3 or 4 months. But some people can hang on to it a little longer, but usually it fades by then.
All right, parents. So if your baby comes out rather hairy, it's okay.
It's okay.
So there's so many weird things that babies can do that are totally normal. Do you have maybe 3 more that I didn't ask about that you're like, okay, let's just make sure everyone knows about?
Yeah, definitely. So hiccups, I think, is a big one. Parents are always asking about that. And I like to say, that you might have even noticed or remembered that your baby hiccuped in your belly, And
I found it annoying.
yeah. And so they do. We don't know exactly why they do it. There's the different theories, like an immature neurological access or an irritation of the diaphragm, but either way, it gets better with time, and they usually don't bother the baby. It usually is more bothersome to the parents than the baby. But they just go away. So that's the one big one. Another one that is really common is congestion and sneezing in the nose, right? So all of this amniotic fluid and everything from birth it gets into their nasal passages, and their noses are so small, right? And so their nasal passages are so small and narrow. So it just kind of gets stuck in there, and other lint and debris and breast milk and all different things, they can get stuck in there. And so that causes them to be a little congested sometimes. And it also triggers a sneeze, because that's your body's natural, normal reaction when stuff is in there, is to sneeze it out, So congestion and sneezing in babies are very normal. There's nothing to do about it. I usually say with congestion, if it is interfering with feeding or sleeping, then sure, you can go ahead and do a little saline drops in the nose, or, use one of those snot suckers to get it out. But if it's not interfering with anything, then it's fine. And it's not, parents always ask, if the baby has a cold, and if it's just the congestion, the sneezing, then, usually the answer is no. If the baby has a cough or, anything else that's going on, like a traditional cold, that's different. But with the congestion and sneezing isolated, it's really common.
All right, let's talk about that snot sucker for a second, because I never was able to stomach, and I know people do it all the time, and I know it's a great brand that has it, but I could never bring myself to sucking the snot out. So I don't even know what we did. Is it okay to just, when do you say, let's get the snot sucker out? And when do you just kind of let the nose be a little runny?
Yeah, for the most part, it's fine to just let it be. If there's so much stuff stuck in there, that when they're trying to feed, right? Because if babies can breathe through their noses and their mouths, right? So if they're trying to feed and their mouth is clogged with what they're feeding, and their nose is so clogged that they can't breathe. Right.
All right. Yeah. I don't remember what we did. Yeah. My husband did it. I just could not. I'm like, oh, I can't do it. Again, no offense.
I find it actually very rewarding to get the snot out with the snot sucker. I think it's amazing, but not everyone feels that way. I totally get it.
I'm just squirmish. Again, I think it's a great tool, and it's a great company that puts it out, but I have my squeamishness. All right. So hiccups.
You could just do saline too. If anybody feels like that, you could just do those they sell baby saline drops, or little, saline drops for the nose, and you could put a few drops of that in, and that with time will just loosen it up, and then it'll either, go back up or down, and it'll come out.
It'll go somewhere. Yeah. All right. So okay. Hiccups and snot. Do you have one more that you want to share?
Yeah, sure. Oftentimes too, the baby's hands and feet are a little bluer, a little colder than the rest of the body. Parents always worry about that, but it's pretty normal for them. There's less blood flow there. Their skin is, really thin, and it should go away, when you warm it up, and it does get better with age, So just the hands and feet being a little bluer or colder is not an indication that your baby's necessarily cold or there's anything wrong. The chest, if you feel the chest, that's a better indicator of if your baby's too hot or cold. If the chest is cold, or if the chest is really sweaty, that's more of an indicator of your baby. And then with being blue, of course, if their lips are blue, that's a whole different thing. But just the hands and the feet, that is very normal.
Should you put socks on the feet if you're seeing cold blue feet?
So you can, you certainly can, especially if the feet are, exposed and they're a little, bluer and colder, you can certainly do that. Yeah.
These are
to warm them up.
These are so great. Now, so here are things, so we just went over things that might look scary, but are totally normal, which is so good. But what are some signs that someone can say, whoa, this really seems overwhelming? When should someone call the doctor?
Yeah, sure. So first off, of course, never hesitate, especially in the beginning, when, babies are, they can't tell us that they don't feel well, or they can't, express themselves at all. So it is often little subtle, things. And if you're concerned, I would definitely call the doctor. Certain things we always talk about are, a fever, right? So a rectal temperature of 100.4 or above in the newborn period is a fever. That's a reason to call your doctor. You don't have to go checking your baby's temperature, though, by any means, unless you feel like something is off or wrong or the baby, feels warm, and you would unclothe them, let them acclimate to room temperature for, a few minutes, and then take that temperature and call if there is a fever. Blood in the stool, vomit, like real vomit, like projectile vomit, is definitely reason. Not spit up, right. Not spit up that dribbles out. The spit up always looks like a lot more volume than it actually is. But if it's something that's like shooting out across the room, like really vomit, or especially if it's, happening, a lot where it's not just, spit up, but then it's like shooting out, that would be reason to call. Working hard to breathe. We talked about that, looking at the ribs and the stomach. If your baby's really lethargic too, they are very sleepy in the first 2 weeks, but you should still be able to feed your baby, every few hours. And if you really can't get your baby up to feed more than a few hours, you would want to give a call, to your pediatrician.
These are really, really good signs. Okay, we're going to take one more break. When we come back, you've given so many tips, such great advice. But if there's one more thing that you have kind of stuck in your head for new and expectant parents, I'd love that. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Okay, so what is the final piece of information? What wonderful tip do you have?
Yeah, I would say that just remember that everything is a phase. The babies,
that's so good.
Yeah, they change so fast, and so whatever it is, for better or worse, it will pass quickly. So savor it, enjoy it, if it's those baby snuggles and the smell, but when you're not enjoying it, that's okay. You're not going to enjoy it 100% of the time, and that's okay too. And just know it will pass.
I think I really appreciate that you said that you don't have to enjoy it, because 100% of the time, because I think for many, there's this expectation that, oh, I just had this baby, I should be so happy. Look at everyone else so happy. And it's such a huge transition and responsibility and so much unknown that I remember one of my friends called me. She's like, I made a big mistake. This was just a really big mistake. And I'm like, let's just give it a beat. But it can feel that way. It can feel like this is just so overwhelming. So thank you for normalizing that sometimes it doesn't feel so great.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Where can people find your work? And especially, again, I love that you're an IBCLC. So are you going to be doing that along with your pediatrics? Like, how are you intertwining those?
Yeah, I'm doing it for my patients. So, any like patients of our practice, we do lactation consults with the mom, if they need it, which a lot of them do. And I started doing it during COVID because, it's been something I had been thinking about for a while, and I was going to wait till I got the actual certification. And during COVID, of course, when we never shut our doors, but there were a lot of moms without the help that they need. So we started doing it at then. It's been good. It's been really good.
And so where on the Upper West Side are you? How can people find you?
Yeah, sure. So I am at a practice called Pediatric and Adolescent Medicine. We are on West End Avenue between 78th and 79th. And you can find me on my website is traceymd.com, TRACEYMD.com. And I have my practice website link up there, as well as my YouTube channel. And on Instagram and Facebook, I'm at Baby Doc Mama. You can find me there. And and I can even share with you, if you want, for your listeners, I have this checklist, this prenatal checklist that
this 10-page checklist.
Yeah, that's like a 10-page checklist. Yeah, it's basically like a guide for that fourth trimester for new moms. And I'm happy to share that too.
I will put that in the show notes. Oh my gosh, you gave such great information and stuff, again, kind of out of the ordinary that I'm sure new parents are seeing and freaking out about. So thank you for normalizing so much of this very abnormal time that one's just trying to get their bearings. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I love talking about this stuff.
Absolutely do well.
This has been an episode of Yoga Birth Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Thanks for listening.
Swimsuit? Check. Sunscreen? Check. Phone charger? Check. Don't forget to pack the 5-Hour Energy. It fits great in a pocket or carry-on, and the alert feeling will help you arrive ready for anything. Now get 20% off when you use code 5HETRAVEL at 5hourenergy.com. Expires April 30th. One-time use only. Not valid with other discounts. Remember, visit 5hourenergy.com and use code 5HETRAVEL to save 20%.